The city never sleeps, and neither does your mind. Neon lights flicker through your window at midnight, horns echo in the distance, and even in silence, your thoughts are louder than the traffic outside. Anxiety in urban life doesn't come only from chaos. It comes from the invisible pressure to keep up, to respond, to endure. You feel the weight of eyes on you, expectations clinging to your skin like smoke, and in the midst of it, you wonder, how can I stay grounded when the world is spinning so fast? This is where Medusa enters not as a monster, but as a symbol. In myth, her gaze could turn men to stone. But in reality, her power was not destruction. It was self-protection. Medusa is the archetype of emotional sovereignty, a reminder that you have the ability to face chaos without being consumed by it. Like her, you can master your gaze, control your response, and stand unshaken while the world swirls around you. Stoicism, the ancient philosophy of resilience, aligns with Medusa's lesson. The Stoics believe that you cannot control the noise of the city, the judgments of strangers, or the speed of modern life. But you can control your perception, your reactions, your internal fortress. The gaze of Medusa becomes a metaphor for Stoic clarity, the ability to see without collapsing. Imagine stepping into the subway during rush hour. Instead of drowning in tension, you shift your gaze inward, practicing the Medusa mindset. You refuse to let the external dictate your internal. This is not withdrawal, it's mastery. The more chaotic the city, the steadier your center must become. Be like Medusa, stand firm, let the world roar, but do not let it define you. Anxiety may knock at your door, but with Stoicism as your weapon, you decide who enters. The city is loud, but your silence can be louder. Urban anxiety is not a flaw, it is the natural consequence of living in environments designed for speed, consumption, and comparison. Women in particular often carry an additional layer, the pressure to look composed, to remain productive, and to meet expectations that never pause. Yet what if the antidote is not to fight the city, but to transform how you respond to it? This is where the philosophy of Stoicism, combined with the archetype of Medusa, becomes a powerful guide. Stoicism teaches us that while we cannot command traffic, deadlines, or other people's opinions, we can govern our responses. Medusa symbolizes the strength of boundaries, the refusal to let external forces invade inner peace. Form a psychological shield, not a shield that isolates you from life, but one that filters chaos, keeping your energy intact. In this exploration, you will learn how to apply practical Stoic tools to daily urban life, reframing thoughts, mastering perception, and setting emotional boundaries. You will also see how Medusa's archetype offers a visual reminder of sovereignty. Her gaze is not about turning others into stone, but about reminding you of your own unshakable presence. If you are tired of feeling overwhelmed, pressured, or drained by city life, this path is for you. By the end, you will hold strategies not just for coping, but for reclaiming your psychological space. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this with another woman who needs inner strength. And leave me a comment telling me, which city and country are you watching from? I want to know how urban anxiety feels in your world, so we can build this journey together. The city's rhythm can feel like both a blessing and a curse. For many women, it offers opportunities, movement, and the thrill of possibility. Yet hidden beneath the surface lies a constant undercurrent of pressure, the relentless deadlines, the social comparisons, the expectation to always be available. Anxiety becomes almost invisible, woven into the daily routine, normalized by the pace of urban life. It's not just the noise of traffic or the glow of screens, it's the unspoken demand to keep up, to never rest, to prove yourself over and over again. This environment breeds a mental exhaustion that often goes unnoticed until it manifests as panic, sleepless nights, or a sense of being permanently on edge. Here, the wisdom of Stoicism enters with quiet force. The Stoics, surrounded by the chaos of markets, politics, and empires,
understood something essential.
Life is not made unbearable by circumstances, but by the way we interpret them. Epictetus taught that what disturbs us is not the events themselves, but our judgment about them. Subway delay, a critical comment from a colleague, or the chaos of a crowded street. None of these are inherently destructive. What intensifies suffering is the internal dialogue that follows. I'm late. I'll fail. I'm not good enough. When we let external chaos dictate internal narratives, we surrender our sovereignty. This is where Medusa's image becomes more than myth. Our legendary gaze, often portrayed as destructive, can be reframed as protective. To be like Medusa in an urban setting is to cultivate the ability to stop the flood of intrusive narratives. At the threshold, instead of letting every demand, every opinion, and every noise invade your mind, you learn to guard your gaze. The modern woman does not petrify the world, but she refuses to let the world's noise petrify her. Her gaze becomes symbolic of a boundary, strong, calm, untouchable. In practice, this means learning to pause before reaction. The Stoics called it prohorosis, the capacity to choose your response regardless of circumstance. When your boss emails you at midnight, and social media reminds you of everything you haven't achieved, when the city demands more than you, can give your Medusa gaze allows you to freeze the impulse to react in panic. You observe without collapsing. This pause creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies freedom. Consider the urban commute, often one of the greatest sources of daily anxiety. Crowded buses, trains that never arrive on time, and the pressure of being late can feel unbearable. Most people spiral into frustration, swearing under their breath or drowning in catastrophic thoughts. But the Medusa mindset reframes the experience. The train is not late, it simply is. You cannot command it into motion, but you can command your inner state. Here, Stoicism teaches amor fati, the love of fate. You choose to accept, even embrace, what is outside your control. With practice, the train delay becomes an unexpected moment to read, breathe, or reflect. Anxiety loosens its grip because your peace no longer depends on external rhythms. The greatest enemy of urban serenity is comparison. In cities, status signals surround you: luxury cars, flawless fashion, social media success stories. For women, this often sharpens into pressure over appearance, achievements, and relationships. Stoicism reminds us that comparison is an illusion, a trap that shifts focus from what is within our power to what is forever beyond it.
Nice.
Medusa's myth offers the same lesson. She did not seek validation from others. Strength came from her own boundaries. To embody this is to say, I will not measure my worth by the noise of the crowd. My worth is anchored in my reason, my choices, my inner steadiness. This radical authenticity breaks the chains of anxiety rooted in external approval. Practical exercises bring these principles into daily life. Begin by practicing premeditatio malorum, a stoic reflection where you visualize possible difficulties before they occur. Before leaving for work, imagine the crowded subway, the impatient drivers, the unexpected criticisms. By preparing your mind in advance, you transform shock into readiness. Medusa's gaze becomes your psychological armor. You are not blindsided, you are prepared. Another practice is journaling each evening, asking, what was within my control today? What was not? Over time, this separates illusion from reality and anchors you in self-command. Silence also becomes a powerful tool. Urban life thrives on noise, constant notifications, endless chatter, background hums that rarely cease. Choosing silence, even for brief moments, is a rebellion against anxiety. Medusa reminds us that stillness is not weakness, but power. Take 10 minutes each day without devices, without speaking, simply observing your breath. This is not mystical meditation, but psychological training. You reclaim the ability to endure stillness, to detach from overstimulation. The quieter you become, the less power the city's noise has over you. The Medusa Stoic path also emphasizes boundaries. In modern cities, boundaries are often blurred. Work invades personal time. Strangers invade emotional space, and digital life invades every hour. To be like Medusa is to draw a clear line. This is where I end, and the world begins. Boundaries are not about isolation, but about clarity. You do not owe constant availability. You do not need to answer every message. You do not have to absorb the energy of everyone around you. Boundaries free you from drowning in demands and allow your presence to remain intact. Ultimately, urban anxiety will never vanish completely. The city will not quiet itself for your peace. But through Stoicism and the archetype of Medusa, you learn that peace does not depend on silence. It depends on self-mastery. The city may roar, but you do not need to roar back. You stand firm, your gaze steady, your mind unshaken. Like Medusa, you embody sovereignty. Like the Stoics, you embrace clarity. And in that combination lies a freedom stronger than the chaos of any metropolis. The deeper challenge of urban anxiety lies not only in the noise outside, but in the constant noise within. In cities, women are rarely given permission to pause. Every message, notification, or demand seems urgent, and the mind mirrors that urgency by producing a relentless stream of what-ifs and I musts. Anxiety thrives in this mental environment, convincing you that every thought is urgent, every problem catastrophic. Yet Stoicism insists that thoughts themselves are not commands. They are impressions, fleeting suggestions. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed by the color of its thoughts, meaning that if you treat every anxious impression as truth, your entire being becomes stained with its urgency. To be like Medusa is to hold the gaze, to look directly at your thoughts without submitting to them. The Medusa metaphor is powerful here because of her association with fear. Legends say that one look from her eyes could paralyze a man, turning him to stone. But imagine reversing that symbolism. Instead of being petrified by the outside world, you allow your gaze to petrify the chaos within. Instead of being immobilized by fear, you immobilize fear itself. This does not mean suppressing emotions, but facing them directly, without flinching. A woman who practices this form of gaze learns to say, "I see my anxiety, but I will not bow to it." Her gaze transforms panic into stillness, reminding her that thoughts are not destiny, they are simply visitors. Urban environments intensify self-consciousness. Everywhere you turn, you are seen. In the office, on the subway, on social media feeds. This hypervisibility breeds anxiety, especially for women who are conditioned to be evaluated by appearance, success, or demeanor. Here, the Stoic principle of indifference becomes liberating. Epictetus urged his students to distinguish between what is up to us and what is not. The gaze of strangers is not up to us. Their opinions are beyond our control. What is within our power is how we carry ourselves, whether we allow their gaze to define our identity. Medusa's story reminds us that power does not come from begging for approval. It comes from embodying a presence so steady that external judgment loses weight. In practical terms, this means practicing what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal. When you catch yourself worrying about how others see you, pause and ask, whose standards am I measuring myself by? Are they rational? Are they aligned with my values? Most often, the anxiety stems from standards imposed by others, not from inner conviction. The Medusa mindset reclaims this territory. You become the author of your standards, not the city around you. For example, instead of evaluating yourself by the speed of your career or the perfection of your appearance, you redefine success as integrity, steadiness, and the ability to master your emotions in chaos. The more you live by self-defined values, the less vulnerable you become to the endless evaluations of others. The Stoics also emphasize the concept of ataraxia, state of inner tranquility, unshaken by external turbulence. In urban life, this translates into learning how to carry stillness within even while the world rushes. Imagine walking through the busiest square in your city. People are rushing, horns are blaring, advertisements are shouting for attention. Yet within, you carry an inner square of silence, a sanctuary untouched by the noise. Medusa embodies this principle. Her myth is often told as a story of isolation, but reinterpreted, it becomes a story of sovereignty. She did not chase after the world, she remained unmovable in her own presence. For the modern woman, this means choosing not to chase every demand, not to be dragged into every storm, but to stand with quiet certainty. Another way to cultivate this steadiness is through deliberate solitude. Solitude in the city is often mistaken for loneliness, but in truth, it can be a practice of power. To sit alone, without distraction, is to test whether you can endure your own company without panic. Many avoid solitude because it forces confrontation with unfiltered thoughts. Yet Stoics would insist that this confrontation is necessary for freedom. Journaling, reflection, or even a silent walk without headphones are ways to practice solitude. Medusa teaches that strength comes from being able to stand alone, to be whole without constant external validation. In solitude, you realize you are not empty or entire. Boundaries are another essential Stoic and Medusa lesson for reducing anxiety. In cities, boundaries are constantly crossed. Your phone blurs work and rest. Advertisements invade private thought. Strangers demand your attention. Anxiety rises because there seems to be no refuge. To be like Medusa is to draw the boundary sharply, to decide what enters and what does not. This can be as practical as setting phone-free hours, refusing unnecessary obligations, or limiting toxic interactions. Each boundary reinforces the message. Your mind is not public property. Anxiety loses power when you refuse to let the world dictate your inner state. Emotional resilience also requires acceptance of imperfection. Urban life thrives on the illusion of constant improvement, faster, thinner, richer, more productive. Anxiety grows when you believe you must keep up with this endless race. Stoicism reminds us that nature itself does not demand perfection, only presence. Marcus Aurelius reflected that every morning he expected to meet people who were selfish, rude or ignorant, yet he chose to accept them as part of life. Similarly, urban life will always be messy. Traffic will exist, interruptions will happen, people will disappoint. Anxiety diminishes when you stop expecting a flawless city or a flawless self. Medusa, with her untamed and terrifying beauty, reminds women that perfection is not the source of power. Authenticity is. Perhaps the greatest gift of combining Stoicism with the Medusa archetype is the transformation of perspective. Anxiety thrives when we see ourselves as fragile victims of the city's demands. But when we shift into the Medusa Stoic lens, we realize we are not powerless. We cannot silence the traffic or erase deadlines, but we can master our perception. We can choose stillness in the rush, sovereignty in the crowd, and clarity amid chaos. Anxiety may never vanish completely, but it no longer controls the center of our being. Like Medusa, we become untouchable. Like the Stoics, we become unshaken. One of the most subtle but destructive forces of urban anxiety is the sense of being constantly observed. Cameras watch every move. Algorithms track every click. Colleagues analyze performance. Strangers on the street evaluate appearances within seconds. This constant exposure can feel suffocating, creating an internal pressure to always perform, to always be presentable, to always live up to an invisible standard. For women, this pressure often doubles. Beauty, productivity, kindness, and strength are expected all at once, with no margin for error. Anxiety grows when life feels like a permanent stage. Yet here, Stoicism offers a radical reframe. The gaze of others is not reality. Their judgment is beyond your control. What belongs to you is how you carry yourself in that gaze. Medusa becomes a vital symbol in this context. In myth, she was cursed with a face so powerful it turned others to stone. The fear she inspired was less about her and more about those who looked at her. In the modern city, women can reverse this narrative. The Medusa gaze is not about harming others. It is about dissolving the power of their judgment. When you walk through the city and feel the weight of eyes, you remind yourself, their gaze belongs to them, not to me. You do not need to contort your life to satisfy their perception. Like Medusa, you hold your gaze steady, not to petrify the world, but to protect the integrity of your inner self. Urban anxiety often manifests as hyperresponsiveness. A message arrives, and the heart races to respond. A colleague frowns, and the mind instantly assumes blame. A social invitation comes, and guilt arises if you say no. This constant overreaction is exhausting because it places control in the hands of others. The Stoic path suggests the opposite. Learning to delay, to slow, to create inner distance before reacting. The Medusa metaphor reinforces this skill. Just as her gaze created stillness, you too can create a pause between what happens and how you respond. This pause is not laziness, it is sovereignty. In that pause, anxiety weakens, because you remind yourself that no one else commands your inner rhythm. Another source of urban anxiety is the relentless pursuit of status. Cities amplify the illusion that value comes from recognition, promotions, likes, wealth, visibility. The anxiety here is endless because the bar always rises. Today's success is tomorrow's baseline. Stoicism dismantles this illusion with ruthless clarity. Status, Marcus Aurelius reminds us, is fleeting, fragile, and dependent on others. To build identity on it is to build on sand. Medusa embodies the rejection of status-driven identity. She was not loved, celebrated, or admired. She was feared and misunderstood. Yet her story endures because her power was undeniable.
The lesson
For modern women is this: your worth does not need applause to be real. It exists in your presence, in your reason, in your ability to govern yourself even when the crowd misjudges you. Practical strategies for this include what the Stoics called the view from above. When anxiety rises because someone criticizes you or because you feel unseen in the city's competitive chaos, imagine looking at your life from a higher perspective. From the viewpoint of the universe, the criticism loses weight. From the scale of centuries, the anxiety about today's performance dissolves. The Medusa gaze complements this by reminding you to turn your eyes inward, not outward. Instead of asking, "How do they see me?" ask, "Am I living in alignment with my values?" Anxiety shrinks when your reference point shifts from external approval to internal coherence. Technology intensifies urban anxiety by collapsing boundaries. The phone becomes an extension of the self, ensuring you are always reachable, always responsive, never fully alone. The constant notifications keep the nervous system in a state of readiness, fueling exhaustion. Here again, Stoicism offers a corrective. You do not owe the world constant access to your attention. Medusa's myth reinforces this principle with striking imagery. Her presence was not open to all. Her gaze was reserved, powerful, selective. For the modern woman, this means learning to treat attention as sacred. You can set times when the phone is silenced, when work does not intrude, when others cannot reach you. By reclaiming your attention, you reclaim the foundation of your peace. Another layer of urban anxiety emerges from unpredictability. City is full of disruptions, sudden cancellations, unexpected expenses, traffic jams, or changing regulations. Anxiety thrives on the illusion that control is possible, and when reality disrupts that illusion, panic follows. Stoicism dismantles this trap by teaching radical acceptance of uncertainty. Life will not conform to plans, and the more rigidly we cling, the more anxious we become. Medusa's lesson here is endurance. She stood unyielding despite being cast out, feared, and cursed. Her strength lay not in controlling her circumstances, but in refusing to collapse under them. For women today, this means learning to stand steady when plans unravel, to accept unpredictability as part of urban life without letting it erode the core of the self. Daily practices reinforce this resilience. Begin each morning with the Stoic exercise of expectation. Remind yourself that you will encounter delays, disappointments, and demands. By anticipating difficulty, you are not pessimistic but prepared. Anxiety weakens when it cannot surprise you. At the end of the day, journal about moments when unpredictability arose. Ask yourself, did I maintain my center or did I surrender it? Each reflection strengthens your Medusa gaze, training you to meet disruption with steadiness rather than panic. Over time, unpredictability shifts from being a threat to becoming an opportunity to practice sovereignty. A final element of urban anxiety is the loneliness hidden within constant crowds. Paradoxically, cities surround us with people, yet often leave us isolated. For women, this isolation can feel heavier when social connections are shallow or transactional. Stoicism teaches that solitude is not a deficit, but a gift when embraced wisely. To be alone is to reconnect with reason, to reflect, to recharge. Medusa, often portrayed in exile, can be reinterpreted as the archetype of chosen solitude. Her isolation was not emptiness, but space for power. Women who embrace solitude as intentional, not imposed, learn to transform loneliness into clarity. Solitude becomes not a wound, but a weapon and antidote to the endless demands of the urban crowd. In the end, the greatest transformation lies in realizing that anxiety is not eliminated by controlling the city, is reduced by mastering the self. The streets will remain loud, the deadlines unrelenting, the opinions plentiful. But within, you can cultivate the Medusa gaze, unshaken, unbending, untouched by noise. You can embody stoic clarity, distinguishing what belongs to you from what does not, mastering perception instead of being mastered by it. Anxiety may never vanish completely, but its power diminishes when your gaze is steady, your boundaries firm, and your mind aligned with reason. Be like Medusa, carry your sovereignty through the chaos, and let the city's storm break against your silence without ever breaching your center. The greatest weight of urban anxiety is not the noise or speed, but the hidden expectation of constant strength. Women often feel compelled to juggle careers, relationships, family responsibilities, and social lives while appearing effortless. The city magnifies this demand, rewarding only performance and rarely acknowledging exhaustion. This pressure creates an internal conflict. You are told to be invincible, yet your body and mind cry out for rest. Stoicism and the archetype of Medusa together offer a solution. True strength is not the denial of vulnerability, but the mastery of how you carry it. Medusa's power was not in pretending weakness did not exist, but in refusing to let others exploit it. Stoicism echoes this truth. Suffering is inevitable, but surrendering to suffering is optional. The modern city convinces women that exhaustion is failure. To slow down is seen as weakness. To decline an invitation as antisocial. To take time for silence as unproductive. Yet the Stoics remind us that living well is not about constant activity, but about intentional activity. Marcus Aurelius wrote that it is not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it. Anxiety grows when energy is scattered in 1,000 directions without alignment to values. Medusa becomes a countersymbol. She did not scatter her power outward, begging for recognition. She contained it, focused it, and her presence was undeniable. For women, this lesson translates into reclaiming time and energy as finite. Precious resources to be used deliberately, not surrendered to. The chaos of constant demands. One of the most practical tools here is the Stoic practice of distinguishing roles. Epictetus often reminded his students that clarity comes from knowing what is required of them in each role. Friend, citizen, professional while. Also remembering that identity is not reduced to any single role. Urban anxiety thrives when women confuse their whole worth with one role, the perfect employee, the flawless partner, the tireless caregiver. The Medusa mindset insists on a broader truth. You are more than any single mask the city demands. To internalize this is to dismantle perfectionism. You no longer collapse when one role falters because your identity is anchored beyond external performance. Boundaries in this context become essential, not only with others but with yourself. Urban anxiety often arises from self-imposed demands. I must do more. I cannot rest until this is perfect. Stoicism teaches that discipline is vital, but discipline without mercy turns into tyranny. Medusa's archetype shows that power requires limits. Her gaze was not indiscriminate, was directed for women today. This means setting boundaries. With inner dialogue, refusing to fuel self-destructive narratives. When you catch yourself saying, I am failing, the Stoic approach invites you to challenge. Is this judgment rational, or is it a distortion? By treating thoughts as impressions rather than truths, you practice the Medusa gaze inward, freezing the spiral before it overtakes you. Another layer of anxiety in urban life comes from competition. Cities are structured on hierarchies: who earns more, who achieves more, who is recognized more. Women in particular often feel pushed into comparison, not only with other women, but also with male standards of success. The Stoics argued that comparison is a thief of peace because it focuses on what lies outside our control. Medusa embodies resistance to comparison by existing outside the game entirely. She did not compete for beauty, status, or admiration. Her power was unique, inimitable. For women, embracing this archetype means stepping out of the race to prove yourself by external metrics and instead cultivating a form of power that is rooted in authenticity. Your worth is not negotiable, nor is it comparable. Practical exercises support this shift. One is radical prioritization. At the start of each week, write down 3 values that matter most to you: integrity, creativity, health, or presence. For example, each time anxiety tempts you to compete or compare, measure your actions against these values instead of against others' success. Another exercise is intentional refusal. Choose one demand each week that you consciously decline, even if small. This builds the muscle of saying no without guilt. Like Medusa's gaze, your refusal becomes an act of sovereignty, freezing the intrusion before it erodes your peace. The body, too, becomes a battlefield for urban anxiety. Women often carry stress, physically tight shoulders, shallow breath, restless sleep. Stoicism and Medusa both remind us that the mind and body cannot be separated. Medusa's myth is embodied. Her snakes, her face, her presence are physical manifestations of her power. Stoicism teaches care of the body not as vanity, but as stewardship, treating it as the instrument through which reason operates. For women, this means that addressing urban anxiety must include bodily practices, conscious breathing when the city overwhelms, deliberate pauses to stretch, walks that reconnect you with the rhythm of nature. These are not luxuries, but acts of sovereignty over the body, ensuring that anxiety does not consume your physical self. Silence, once again, emerges as a weapon. The city is full of voices that attempt to dictate identity. Advertisements telling you who to be, colleagues judging your worth, strangers projecting assumptions. Medusa, often vilified, embodies resistance to impose narratives. Her silence is a refusal to explain, justify, or beg for understanding. Stoicism reinforces this. With the idea that reputation is neither good nor bad, it is indifferent. To combine the two is two. Cultivate the ability to endure being misunderstood without collapsing. This practice reduces anxiety profoundly. You no longer waste energy trying to control perception. You live aligned with your principles and let others interpret as they will. Ultimately, this chapter reminds us that the antidote to urban anxiety is not becoming harder, faster, or more perfect, but becoming anchored, deliberate, and sovereign. The Medusa Stoic woman is not untouched by stress. She feels it, acknowledges it, and yet refuses to surrender her center. She knows her worth cannot be measured by exhaustion. Her identity cannot be reduced to roles, and her power does not require validation. In the midst of the city's demands, she carries silence, boundaries, and clarity as her shield. Anxiety may knock, but it finds no open door. She has chosen sovereignty over surrender, presence over panic, authenticity over perfection. Urban anxiety often hides in the small, repeated choices that go unnoticed. It's not always the glaring crises, the missed deadlines or social conflicts, but the constant, subtle decisions that accumulate stress over time. Choosing to respond immediately to every message, agreeing to every request, attending every social obligation, these micro-decisions build a life governed by external demands. For women navigating the city, this can create the illusion of obligation without agency, of busyness without purpose. The Medusa archetype and Stoic philosophy offer an alternative. Sovereignty begins in the small acts of intentionality. By claiming autonomy in the minor choices, you cultivate resilience against the greater currents of anxiety. Time management is essential in this pursuit, but not in the sense of efficiency alone. Stoics emphasize that every moment wasted on external chaos is a moment of personal power surrendered. Medusa embodies the principle that attention is a finite resource to be guarded. For women in the urban environment, this means deciding consciously how to allocate energy and focus. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what aligns with inner values. A train delayed, a meeting canceled? Instead of panic, you redirect energy to what is meaningful, reflection, reading, or mindful presence. The city's unpredictability no longer hijacks your internal state. Emotional regulation is another critical pillar. Anxiety often arises when emotional responses are automatic and unchecked. Stoicism teaches that emotions are judgments, not facts. Fear, frustration, and guilt are not inherently destructive. They become so when we surrender to them. Medusa symbolizes mastery over this internal landscape. Her gaze does not flee from danger, it confronts it without collapsing. The modern woman can mirror this approach by acknowledging anxiety without allowing it to dictate behavior. Techniques such as mindful breathing, journaling, and reflection act as extensions of this gaze, creating space between stimulus and response, allowing reason to govern reaction. Social pressures compound anxiety in urban environments. The expectation to perform, to look composed, to appear constantly capable, creates a suffocating environment. Women frequently experience this pressure on multiple fronts professionally, socially, and personally. Stoicism encourages the practice of focusing only on what is within your control. Medusa's archetype reinforces this by demonstrating that the gaze of others does not define value. A woman who embodies this principle selectively absorbs feedback, letting in what aligns with her values and deflecting what does not. Anxiety diminishes when judgment is filtered through reason rather than fear. Boundaries remain central to sustaining inner calm. Urban environments are rife with intrusion, calls, emails, social obligations, and unsolicited advice. Each intrusion can fragment attention and intensify stress. Medusa's gaze symbolizes the power of a clear boundary, untouchable and respected. Women practicing this archetype assert their limits unapologetically, knowing that self-respect begins with protecting the mind and body. Stoicism complements this approach, reinforcing that personal power lies not in controlling others, but in controlling access to oneself. By practicing consistent boundary setting, anxiety loses its foothold. Another avenue to cultivate resilience is deliberate exposure to challenges. Urban life presents countless small adversities: crowded commutes, demanding colleagues, unexpected setbacks. Stoicism encourages embracing challenges as opportunities for growth. Medusa's myth illustrates endurance through adversity. She survived isolation, judgment, and fear without surrendering her essence. For women, adopting this lens means reframing daily stressors not as threats, but as training grounds for mastery. Each inconvenience becomes a test of equanimity, a chance to exercise composure, patience, and reasoned judgment. The city often induces sensory overload, a hidden driver of anxiety. Continuous noise, lights, crowds, and information streams bombard attention, leaving little room for reflection. Stoicism recommends cultivating inner silence amid external chaos. Medusa's gaze functions similarly, still unyielding, impenetrable. For women, this can be practiced through short daily retreats, walks, meditation, or moments of focused breathing in a psychological sanctuary in the midst of urban tumult. Over time, these intentional pauses reinforce resilience, allowing the mind to reset, process, and respond with clarity rather than reactive anxiety. Identity stability is crucial. Urban life pushes women toward fluid identities shaped by social expectations, trends, and peer comparisons. Anxiety arises when the self becomes negotiable, defined by external pressures. Stoicism asserts that a grounded identity stems from reason and values rather than appearances or approval. Medusa embodies radical self-possession. Her existence was non-negotiable. She defined herself independently of the crowd's judgment. Women today can mirror this by cultivating clarity about personal values, priorities, and beliefs. When internal compass guides action, external chaos loses its capacity to generate panic. Reflection and journaling are tools to anchor this mindset. Writing provides a medium for processing daily challenges, distinguishing what is within control from what is not. Medusa's archetype serves as a reminder to face uncomfortable truths directly, without denial or embellishment. Stoic exercises like evening reflection help women assess where they maintain composure, where judgment faltered, and where growth is possible. Over time, these practices cultivate awareness and mastery, strengthening the ability to withstand urban pressures without succumbing to anxiety. Ultimately, mastery over urban anxiety requires a combination of vigilance, reflection, and inner sovereignty. Medusa and Stoicism converge to teach that the external world cannot be perfectly controlled, yet the mind can be. Women who internalize this wisdom learn to meet the city's relentless pace with calm, resilience, and intentionality. Anxiety loses its dominance when presence, boundaries, and reason govern the response. Be like Medusa. Stand steady, preserve your center, and let the city's chaos collide with your silence without breaching your inner strength. Sovereignty is yours, unshakable and enduring. The journey through urban anxiety is not a path toward perfection or total control. It is a path toward sovereignty. Cities will never quiet themselves, and challenges will never cease. Yet, the Medusa Stoic mindset teaches that true power lies not in shaping the world, but in mastering oneself. Anxiety may knock, deadlines may pressure, judgments may press in from all sides. But your inner state remains inviolable when anchored in reason, boundaries, and clarity. The gaze you cultivate is both shield and compass, guiding you through chaos without surrendering your center. Daily practice reinforces this sovereignty. Reflection, journaling, deliberate solitude, and boundary setting are not indulgences. They are acts of self-preservation and mastery. By consciously choosing how to respond, what to value, and where to focus attention, you reclaim energy that anxiety would otherwise consume. Medusa reminds us that standing alone is not weakness, is power. Stoicism reminds us that perception shapes experience. Together, they form a psychological toolkit for resilience, composure, and intentional living in even the most demanding urban environments. Be like Medusa. Let the city roar. Let deadlines press. Let opinions flow. But stand firm in your presence. Your peace, clarity, and inner authority are yours to guard. Anxiety may arise, but it does not define you. Each moment of calm, each act of intentionality, and each boundary drawn strengthens the unshakable core within you. The world may challenge you, but your sovereignty endures silent, steadfast, and unstoppable.